Thanks to everyone. And I was telling Pilar, thanks to you because every time you hear from me, it's because I'm asking something from you. So
Yeah.
one day I know you're going to you're going to block me and say, but thanks for making it here.
I did not know there was a mafia thing going on, though.
There was, well,
That's new.
that Spanish mafia that we were talking about with Fernando and everything. So yeah, we have quite a few Spaniards in Silicon Valley. But anyway, so Victor before was saying that they'd gone 20 minutes without speaking about AI. We put it directly in the title, so we're talking about AI. And we're with Pilar, so we have to talk about AI. We've been hearing a lot about large language models and linguistics and everything, and that's basically what you decided that you wanted to do 20-something years ago. Can you tell us a bit more about that? What sparked that? How did that all start?
I'm old, so I think that the people that I was working with at the time started working in AI when it wasn't fashionable. There were like limited number of people in the world, so we were we knew a lot of each other, I guess. There were only a few universities, a few faculties where you could actually do anything that had to do with AI, and it wasn't an official degree. It was always part of something else. And in my case, I come from a hybrid background because my first degree is in linguistics. It's in philology. And people wonder, it's like, and you are working in engineering, how? But, life takes you in many different ways. And I had a technical background as well, and I ended up doing a master's degree in natural language, in cognitive science and natural language, and then a PhD in AI, in computational linguistics. So, yeah, you kind of fall in love with AI as soon as you understand what it is, and now it's become something that everybody knows about.
So you're basically in AI before everyone was talking about AI, because you started Indices in 2003.
Yes.
You can tell us a bit more about that, but what's fascinating is that you start Indices, and then there's a whole process that leads to the sale of Indices. But it's interesting, when I was Googling some facts, that if you Google Indices and the acquisition by Intel, that's back in 2012, 13, and the headline actually in the newspapers back then was, Intel acquires Indices to be stronger in AI. They already were saying AI back in 2013, no?
Yeah, we sold early.
So you can walk us a bit more through the process of Indices and what led to that.
Well, like everything I think in my life, it's a very convoluted story. I had the privilege of getting a Fulbright scholarship to study at Stanford as part of my PhD. And once you're here in the Bay Area, you get contaminated with this kind of entrepreneurial spirit. It's unavoidable. And then I ended up going back to Spain to work on my PhD with a research group that I was working with. And of course, you have like 1,000 ideas of what you can apply this to. And it's like, why are we not doing more of this? And I talked to the director of my PhD thesis, and we ended up co-founding the company. It was the first company coming out of the University of Seville from the philology faculty. So that was the first one. They did not have a template for anything regardless, so we had to negotiate everything. And it was quite an interesting adventure because every time we raised capital, the most asked question at an international level would be, why Spain? And the most asked question while raising capital in Spain would be, why Seville? So, you end up having to explain yourself and justify why you're doing what you're doing, where you're doing it, and why there is a strong chance of success there.
And here you are. You're from Seville, I'm from Galicia, and we're speaking about AI in San Francisco. So something's right or wrong, I don't know. AI has now become mainstream, no? And it's something that you've been already speaking about, we said, for well over a decade. Why now? What's led to AI being so mainstream right now, today, in the last 2 years?
Well, I think that we all know what happened 2 years ago, right? It's competitors, ChatGPT came out. And I think that there are moments where the technology reaches a level of maturity where entrepreneurs think, okay, now's the chance, now we're going to break through, now we're going to do this. And there have been different kind of successes, but sometimes, even though they were partially successful, they didn't catch on as much. And that happened, for instance, with Siri. There was, you guys remember when Siri came out? And it was very exciting, and then kind of phased out a little bit. And then came Alexa, and kind of, we're going to go used to Alexa and the 3 things that we would ask for it. And then the Google Assistant, and said, yeah. And then it phased out a little bit. And then came the Transformers, right? And that was the real revolution. That was in 2017 when they were invented, 2018 when BERT came out. And many people don't know, but the Transformers came out of Google research. And BERT was the first transformer. And everything else that has happened since that has been more engineering prowess than any disruptive breakthrough in science. So it's been about more data and more computational power. And then, we got into the different models that have been coming out until OpenAI decided to throw out in the world ChatGPT, and that was like a coin toss, in my opinion. It's like, it could have gone right, and I think it has gone reasonably well, and it could have gone wrong and created another AI winter, which is something that nobody wanted.
So in doing my research to be able to speak with you, because we've known each other for 8 years, but I'd never actually sat in a stage to interview you. So I had to do some more extra research now. And I dug from the contacts, and using the Spanish mafia, I got to Katy Vargas, and who is the head of communications for Southern Europe for Google. And when I was asking her, what should I ask Pilar? And she said, Pilar is really good at really explaining tech in a very understandable way. No? So you speak a lot about multimodal AI, and you've been discussing this for quite some time. And I'd love for you to be able to explain in layman terms what is multimodal AI.
Well, I think that is an incredibly important disruption, and I have to say that I have personally been working in multimodal communication for a very long time. As a matter of fact, my PhD thesis is on multimodal interaction. So when we speak about multimodality, what we mean is channels of communication. So if you think about one modality, it could be speech, could be text, it could be hand signals, it could be vision. There are many different channels, right? And initially, with the different types of machine learning that we have been using, it was one. We were focusing, okay, this is computer vision, this is speech recognition, this is natural language understanding, but based on text, for instance. But now with multimodality, we try to fuse all those, or at least some of those modalities, in a more comprehensive way, so that the processing is similar or analogous in some way to the way we process information. Like right now, you're listening to me, you're seeing my face, you're seeing my Spanish kind of hand movements and everything, or even if you're close enough, you can see my lips. All that creates a redundant set of information that makes it easier for everybody to understand, to follow, to get the tone, to get what I'm trying to convey to you. And that is what's the most interesting thing about the technologies that we are working with today.
We had Reid Hoffman earlier today, and he was actually, he was giving himself, his AI version was giving himself an intro of him. So it was, we actually, the tones and the movement and everything was actually the one thing that he was emphasizing on. No? Looking at what you're looking at and being where you are right now at Google, prior to this, you've been in several multinationals, always in the AI side. What is the one thing that right now is exciting you the most? I mean, if you think about the future of AI in the next 5, 10, 20 years, what is the one thing that you're excited about? We were discussing before that you're truly excited about what this means for the future. Expand.
I personally am the most excited that I'm about what we are able to do today is the fact that the tools that we're developing and empowering scientists in all knowledges, in all fields of knowledge or science, to move faster, to move further, to imagine things that they could never do before because it was either so expensive or it required complexity, or it required an army of people working on things. And the example of that came out of Google that I love talking about is AlphaFold 3. Are you guys familiar with AlphaFold 3? No? Well, there is one person that is, 2. So AlphaFold 3 is a tool that came out of Google DeepMind. The original AlphaFold and AlphaFold 2 basically worked out a problem that biologists had been working on for decades, is about predicting the 3D structures of protein. And before this tool came out, it was literally a full PhD, that 5 years of work of one person to do one. There are 200 million of those. So AlphaFold came out with AlphaFold 2, actually, and was able to do the 200 million in weeks. No? In weeks. So it blows my mind how many centuries of work had been progressed, advanced, accelerated, and now put in the hands of the world, doctors, biologists, all kinds of scientists, to be able to have all those proteins already kind of worked out for them to do research in many areas, in many, many more areas. And the difference between AlphaFold 2 and AlphaFold 3 is that instead of predicting the 3D structures of proteins alone, it does the same with all particles of life. It blows my mind to think what the world is going to be able to do with that. And now that is just one field. Now think about new materials, think about space, think about biology, geology, anthropology, anything that you can think of. We're putting these tools in the hands of experts that before had to manually do a bunch of things and now can get them done like in minutes or in hours. I personally think that we're on the verge of a new renaissance. As time goes by in the next few years, we're going to see an explosion of breakthroughs in every single field of science. I mean, it's a really exciting time, and we're here, we're part of it, we're contributing to it, we're not just witnessing, we're part of the whole movement, right?
And in that excitement, you speak a lot about intelligent conversational agents, no? A bit more as well. How do we interact with them? What is the future in that direction?
Well, I have my particular version of what that is going to look like. I've been investing in that version for like 25 years now, so yes. I think that the most interesting part of that is that right now we're getting to a level of maturity in this kind of technologies where they're useful enough. They're not altogether there. They're not completely reliable. They're not as smart as some people think. They're pretty dumb in some ways. But they're useful enough to do part of your work. So in some of the discussions that I've had in other forums, some people are a little antagonistic about AI, believe it or not. They say, well, but these things lie a lot and they fail a lot, and how can you trust them? I was like, yeah, that's true. But when you get somebody, you work with somebody and they're not perfect, what if you could get somebody that does 80% of your work? The other 20% is wrong, and you're going to have to redo. I mean, let me think about it. I'm going to take it. I'm going to take it. If I can spare myself 80% of whatever task and just have to focus on making sure that the 20% that is wrong or that is, imprecise or badly done, I have to do myself, that'd be great. And that implies that we can have agents that you can talk to and communicate with that can help you with anything that you can think of. They can help you cook. You can have like your chef giving you instructions. I don't cook very well, so I need someone to give me instructions as to how to cook. You can have your own coach that helps you with any sports, any dance, any public speaking, body language, anything that you can think of. You can have someone that understands your needs, that can adapt to your speed and your availability, and that can focus specifically on how to make you progress further in whatever field. and potentially at a price that's probably going to be ridiculous, right? Because it's going to be available for everybody. So you democratize access to services that now are only available to a few, either because they're not available or because they're very expensive. So again, I think that while we're not there yet, we're on a path where we're going to get AI help us be better people, have more time to relate to one another, have more time to contribute personally to things that we care about other than just work. I'm very positive about the future, as I think you can tell.
So this conversation could also be, I mean, you could have interviews as well with facilitators that are AI, no?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, not so long ago, I did an interview on the radio, and the very first question, and Kathy was there, and the very first question that the journalist asked was like, so, do you think that in the future there will be a virtual journalist that will be doing my job? And I said, yes. It's like, well, we're not starting on a good foot, are we? But the reality is that sooner or later we're going to get AIs that are able to replicate or emulate certain behaviors, certain tasks. I believe that we still, as humans, have something special to add to the mix. So it's never going to be the same. It's going to be something different. So, you know, for creative work, where the human ingredient makes it special, it will still make it special no matter how much AI you throw at it.
So before they were saying that we'd gone 20 minutes without speaking about AI. And then when speaking about AI, we've gone 20 minutes without speaking about risks, the downturn. So what could potentially be those risks that you would see?
There are some risks. But, you know, what's happening right now is what most of you probably have heard is a very polarized discussion on very opposing sides of the spectrum, and both of them populated with extremely well-educated and intelligent people. So who do you believe, right? You have those that think that AI is advancing in a way that is endangering the human race and is endangering the future, and it's a, you know, civilization ending kind of future. And then you have the other side of the spectrum that thinks that, no, everything is okay, kumbaya, just throw it out, have people test it, access for everybody, open models for everybody, nothing will happen. I think that common sense dictates that we are somewhere in between those two. I don't think that the level of maturity of the technologies that we have today are civilization ending. I think that the only possibility of civilization ending catastrophes where AI is involved also involve human stupidity. So I would say that the highest risk that we have today is human stupidity, and that's not so far from what we had a decade ago. In terms of the openness of the models and so on, in my opinion, it is, you know, I'm in favor of open source. Open source has driven innovation in ways that it would have been possible if we didn't have it. Now, that said, I think that there is also value in having closed models. We still don't know how the models perform certain things. We cannot make them 100% foolproof, but we can test them in certain ways that we cannot control with open models. So I think that for certain things and in certain cases, you have to allow for closed models that can be trained, can be safer, can be used for a particular number of domains or tasks. And there are also needs for open models that are probably going to be used in different cases and that imply a certain level of risk that is higher than the closed models in most cases. So my answer to that is be mindful of human stupidity and let's use common sense.
And what about back to human stupidity? No, but about AI being abused. No, what are the risks there, and what are your fears as well there? Because there's also an instance in which, and Reid was actually mentioning it this morning in his interview, in which if you force AI to a corner, it will tell you things that, like he was actually mentioning the example of when they started with all the racial biases on AI. No, but that was also once AI was cornered. What are your fears around the use or abuse of AI?
Well, there's always bad actors. No matter what technology you have, no matter what you're doing, there is always someone that, for one or the other reason, has ill intentions, right? But it's also up to us to put the elements there to deter those bad actors from acting. I mean, everything that has to do with cybersecurity is the same thing, right? The moment that you develop a new algorithm, there is somebody trying to hack it. And then you have cybersecurity to prevent it, and then they get a little farther, and you get a little higher. And I think that that dynamic is always the case. I think that I'm more worried about stupidity than ill intentions, because it's what we don't know that can hurt us the most. I think that when you have an evildoer that can think about how to use this for the wrong purposes, then the likelihood of some of us who are trying to prevent that, thinking about those possibilities and catching on quickly, is higher than if someone that's really stupid that you would never think that anybody in the world would actually do that because it's just stupid. Yeah, that's unpredictable.
The limit of human stupidity. But to the human stupidity as well, the one thing that we have to realize is that what is the role that government and policy are going to play here? Because, I mean, there has to be a role that was played. What is your thoughts about the role? And also, in what direction do you think that we should or shouldn't go? I mean, we just saw the example in Europe. What are your thoughts?
Well, Google's position on this is that AI is too important not to be regulated, right? But it's also very important not to over-regulate, especially because now is when AI is starting to grow. Now is the bud. Like, we're at the very beginning of something wonderful, something that can change. It's already changing our society and how we interact with each other and what we can do, right? So it's important to regulate, but it's important to not over-regulate. And this is particularly important for Europe. Right now, the US is doing great in AI, China is doing great in AI, Europe is not necessarily doing that great in AI. And it's a shame because we have, in Europe, there are a huge number of extremely clever and talented, well-educated and well-trained people. But I think that sometimes policies get on the way of innovation. So we have to be very careful not to shoot ourselves on the foot in that case.
What have you seen right now? I mean, you've just come back from a trip around Europe. You've been visiting several cities. What have you seen? What appetite have you seen in these last few weeks that you've been touring Europe?
Well, I've seen a lot of entrepreneurship, a lot of new ideas, a lot of big companies that want to start using AI or are using AI at least in some ways, but are looking for ways to bring them more into their everyday lives. And a lot of uncertainty and a lot of wondering, what the heck do I do with this? And how is it going to change my market? And I think that one of the biggest questions is not necessarily how you can leverage, for instance, AI tools to be more efficient, but how the fact that AI exists in the whole ecosystem is going to change your market. And sometimes it's a little more about being faster, selling cheaper, or having something that's more sophisticated, or generating demand, or the things that you normally take into consideration in any business. Sometimes the whole market is going to change, right? And it's hard to anticipate that if you don't understand how deep or how powerful the AIs that we are creating as disruptors can be in certain fields.
In one of the interviews that I heard from you, you were talking about Google having the ability to make AI more available early on and not doing it. What triggered the fact? What triggered this AI race? No, I mean, why did Google have it and not share it more openly? And what triggered that OpenAI did? And how did, from within, what are the things that you've seen? Was society ready?
I joined Google in 2019, right before COVID hit. So that was like spot on. And this whole generative AI craziness had not started yet. So I've been a witness to what happened within Google and the decision-making before we launch or the technology was launched. As I mentioned before, the technology was actually invented in Google. As a matter of fact, we had already made public the fact that we had Lambda, and Lambda was pretty much something very similar to ChatGPT. And it was actually, I was part of the workforce within Google Research that went around surveying, let's say, the top thought leaders in our organization to try to decide when was the right time to launch this tool. And by when, I mean not in terms of the date, but in terms of the level of maturity. When do we think this thing is safe enough so that we can put it out in the wild or in the open? And the reality is that no company, no serious company, before had launched something that had a 60% performance. So we decided that as Google, we had a bigger responsibility. People think very highly of the search engine and the services that we provide. And throwing something, even as an experiment, that only told you something factual 60% of the time was not good enough for us. ChatGPT decided that it was okay, so they launched it. And in my opinion, that was like tossing a coin. People could have gone crazy and said, I mean, this AI thing doesn't work. I don't want to hear about it. Don't give me anything. Or embrace it like the way that they have, right? And fortunately, technology has been able to, on the one hand, mitigate all the challenges and problems that arose from throwing something like this without previous warning, and at the same time, catapult it in a way forward, speed up the innovation and the need to actually come to a level of maturity that was good enough to launch. But like I always say, I think that one of the reasons why I'm very happy working for Google is because we put responsibility before speed. So I think it's a lot more important to make sure that you're launching something that is safe enough. It's not going to be perfect, but it's safe enough, and you've done a reasonable effort to test than be the first or be fast, right? So, everybody wants to be fast. We want to be fast too. But when it comes to being responsible, I think that's more important.
So as I mentioned, we have a bunch of founders in the room, and you and I were discussing there's a bunch of founders out there right now that are going into AI. They're going into AI, they're funding companies that are AI. What advice do you have for those entrepreneurs that are going into the sector?
Well, I think that the AI world has become extremely shiny, but not everything that is called AI is really that shiny. So I think that you have to be very careful when you analyze what is a temporary advantage that is likely to go away as soon as the technology evolves, and it will evolve, versus what is a differential advantage that is unique and that is the right time to do, and that the dependencies that you have on the externalities of your own business will not drown you or take it away from you. I don't know when I'm speaking code. Does that come out clear? So I'm talking about, for instance, one of the new jobs that have come out recently, and it's a job, it's not a company, is prompt engineering, right? So people are going crazy creating, degrees about masters or masters in prompt engineering. By definition, prompt engineering needs to go away. So is there an opportunity to do that now? Yes. Is it a good opportunity? Fantastic. But you have to think about it in a time frame. We are working towards making LLMs so that they will understand what you say without such sophisticated and complicated prompts. So you're literally working against the industry in that. And it's opportunistic and it's good. And you can learn a lot from the models by understanding how to talk to them, which can give you then an edge to do something different. But mind you that that is a time-limited career, let's say. Same thing happens when you have an AI idea. It might be something that has a 7 to 10 year lapse, and if you can make it work and sell it or within that time frame, that's fantastic. But it's not the kind of idea that you're going to be able to go IPO with, or it's going to last beyond that time frame, right? So I would just be cautious.
So now putting your founder hat, this morning we had a quote from Jeff Bezos that said that the 10-year overnight success, and basically what you built at Indices was a 10-year overnight success because it was a bit over a decade before you were acquired. But you raised significant capital out of Seville. You scaled the business, and then you sold it to a multinational in the US, to Intel. What advice do you have for founders here that are at some point in their journey? And by the way, I'm going to give you a fun fact. One of the investors that you made really happy was our next door neighbor when we were at the Endeavor Spain office, which was Inverredi. So they were literally door to door with us, and they were extremely happy. So when we moved in, they were still in celebratory mode. So what advice would you have for founders here?
Well, I don't think this is politically correct. Just don't do it in a small place where everybody's going to ask you why here, and that's going to become the mono theme of every conversation where you raise capital. I think that one of the reasons why I did it there is because I was extremely adamant. I said, why not here? What is missing here? I have all these things, and I have all this. And yes, it is true that the ingredients were there, but then I didn't anticipate, or I was not mature enough or knowledgeable enough to understand that people's perceptions were basically unavoidable and could become a huge barrier to raise capital. And it did become a huge barrier. And I can give you a data point. It took me 2 years, 2 full years, to raise 60,000 euros. 2 years in Seville, well, in Spain, because I was in Seville, I was trying all over Spain. And then I happened to win a TV contest. So life takes you in funny ways. So I won this TV contest, and part of the prize was to go to the Sloan School of Management at MIT to do this kind of entrepreneurial program. It was like a week or a 10-day thing. And within that week, I raised 1 million. So that gives you an idea of the order of magnitude, the time scale, the commitment that you can get when somebody sees a good idea. Took me a week versus 2 years. 60,000 versus 1 million. Don't go for the 60,000. Try to get the million thing.
You still think it's that way now? I mean, given it's been over a decade now, but you see companies, I mean, I'm thinking Mistral or others that are in the field that have been raising significant capital, yes, out of Paris, not Spain, but still, it's not...
Yeah, Paris is not Seville. Things have improved a lot. I think that a lot more companies are coming out of places that are not necessarily known by high tech or things like that. So in Spain and in other places, opportunities have been, coming up, and I'm glad about that. But still, we have a lot of work to do. And I think that we live in a much more globalized world. So it depends on what you're doing and how strategic it is to have your headquarters somewhere, depending on your valuation. Like, that any company, any high-tech company that you incorporate in the West Coast, in the US, is going to be valued at 3 times as much as whatever you have anywhere in Europe. And that's the way it goes. But it's going to be 3 times cheaper to develop anything there as well, because trying to hire engineers here and competing with the likes of Google is crazy as well. So you're going to have to pay a very high fee in order to get good people to work here. Right? So it takes balance. You might have your development team somewhere, you might have your CEO somewhere else, you might have like a combination of strategies that gives you the best of both worlds, depending on what is convenient for the field that you're tackling, right?
Fascinating, because as you say this, I'm thinking about your colleague at Google, Bernardo Quintero. who the stubbornness of Bernardo is the reason why Google has an office in Malaga for the last 15 or 20 years. No, when I think it must have been their 12th office worldwide was in Malaga of all places. No, and it was because he said that it had to be from Malaga. It couldn't be from Madrid. It couldn't be from Palo Alto. It had to be there. No, so I feel that his stubbornness paid off at least. No, and now 20 years later he's still there. No, so.
And I think that. In this case, it does work out, and when you get especially the support and you provide the value and you can, pull a large corporation to make a huge investment, and that is also aligned with a strong commitment from the city to make the city grow, I think that is fantastic. And it has, Malaga, I advise you to go and visit Malaga. It's beautiful, it's gorgeous, it's growing, the beach is fantastic, the weather is great, the food, what can I tell you? But it's a very complex formula, and I think that personally I am helping Seville more now as part of the Spanish diaspora than when I was there as a small company. So I think that if you want to help your small city, like I wanted to help my city, you have to judge what's the best way of doing that. And if you have the strength and the business idea to do something amazing and make it happen there, then all the power to you. Please don't let me hold you back. But you should also consider the other path if it makes sense.
It's a fascinating case because in Malaga now, the cybersecurity center for Southern Europe, actually,
Virus Total.
Yeah, it's now based out of Malaga, which is not a huge town in Spain. It must be what, the 8th largest, 9th? I don't know. And I might be being generous even. And it was the stubbornness of this one entrepreneur that actually sold the company to Google. And at one point, when everything was already signed and ready to go, they said, okay, now you'll move to Madrid or to California. And he said, no, I'm staying in Malaga. The deal's off the table. And he said, sure, okay. And then they came back and they said, okay, we regret it. No, the deal's still on the table. You can stay in Malaga. No? But it's fascinating.
It's about risk-taking.
Yeah,
it's about every time you make a decision and you put your cards on the board, it's about, okay, sometimes they could say, yes, that's fine. Or sometimes they say, okay, the deal is off. So you're running a risk, and sometimes that pays off, and sometimes it doesn't. So I think that to be an entrepreneur, you have to be a little bit of a risk taker. Otherwise,
a bit of a risk taker and a paranoid optimist that everything's always going to go right. Anyway, with that, Pilar, thank you so much again for doing this.